How you doing, Eric?
Good. How are you, Chris?
Good, good, good. Let me turn this speaker down so I'm not drowning you out. How's everything going? You doing pretty good?
Yes, sir. Running
Okay,
a
hear you.
little low on sleep. I was working very late. I
Uh-huh.
didn't get a full day's sleep, but I'm feeling good. How about
Okay,
you,
you
buddy?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good, baby. I'm feeling good. I'm
All right.
feeling good. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for joining the beautiful infinite creators. But before we start, I always do this. I always do this. First things first. I salute. I salute the divinity in you. I respect the divinity in you. Mm.
Likewise, brother. Thank you.
All right.
Likewise.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. So I'm gonna let it rip in a second. So basically, who we have here, we have Eric Thompson. Eric Thompson is the founder and inventor of subtle energy sciences. Subtle energy sciences. I rock with Eric heavy. I found him on Instagram. He's doing his thing. I love what he's got going on. Eric, I don't want to take your spotlight from you. I don't want to take the spotlight from you. What I need to know is give us a little insight on the origin. Take us to how it all began for you on your journey.
Sure. Well, to give it just a really brief introduction of who I am, my name's Eric Thompson. I'm the founder of a company called Subtle Energy Sciences, and what we do is we we create a technology that's designed to boost and enhance health, wellness, um, peak performance, and even raising one's consciousness. And the principle that we use is what we call subtle energy. And in science, there are four known forces. There's uh, electromagnetism, gravity, and the strong and weak nuclear forces. But what we've found, and I'm sure many of your listeners have found, is that there's a whole spectrum of energies that are outside of the recognized four known forces in physics. We refer to those energies as subtle energies because typically they're too subtle to be detected by conventional electromagnetic instruments. However, we can use those same electromagnetic instruments to detect the effects or the presence of subtle energy on other biological entities, including plants, humans, and animals. So we know subtle energy exists. In fact, that's how we first got clued into electromagnetism before it was scientifically proven. We couldn't detect it uh, directly, but what we could do is we could detect its effects on other things. So we knew it was there. And it's the same thing with subtle energy. And the way I got introduced into this originally was when I was a kid. I got interested into martial arts. I discovered Bruce Lee, and my world was on fire. I realized that's what I wanted to do. I used to save up all my lunch money and uh, to buy Bruce Lee books. I would buy martial arts equipment out of the karate and kung fu magazines, and had a heavy bag on our swing set in the backyard. And this was before I could even take lessons. I mean, my mother was a single mom raising two kids, and I had asked her for about a year or two to let me take karate lessons, and she wasn't ready to do it yet. So I just launched into it to myself for a long time, and then finally we were able to pay for my lessons. Um, I took to it like a fish in water. I loved our local dojo and what we were doing. And one of the principles that was introduced to me was this idea of chi, right?
Mm.
So uh, when we got higher up in the rankings, we would learn a meditation method called Yan Chi, and it would help us to build the internal chi. And to the point that there was one of the higher ranking guys in our particular school could do things like putting out flames from 12 feet away, or without it being the air molecules from the waving motion of his hand, he was using chi to put a flame out. And he would do things like, you know, slap you on your shoulder, and you could feel the energy run down the meridians in your arm. So that was, at the time, whether some people would call that naivete, to me, I was fascinated with it, and I became convinced that it was something real. As we progress in life, I was pretty much a problem child. I had problems in school, all throughout school, from elementary to high school. And I was later in life diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The first half of my adult life, the first 20 years was actually very difficult for me. There was a lot of suicidal ideation. It was very difficult for me to keep a job, very difficult for me to keep relationships of any kind for very long. I couldn't keep a car. I couldn't keep myself in a home. I did the better part of 5.5 years or so homeless. During that time, I struggled to keep a job. I struggled to keep an apartment. And it wasn't always because I was drinking or doing drugs or anything like that. I just could not adapt to this world. It was very difficult for me. During that time, I lived in a combination over about a 5-year period. I lived in homeless shelters and halfway houses for about a year. I lived on the streets proper, like sleeping in a back alley for about a year and a quarter. I lived in a van for about a year and a quarter, year and a half. I lived in a tent for about a year and a quarter. I lived in a gutted trailer. During that time, I realized that I wanted to dedicate my life to healing my life. And I felt like to do that, I was going to need a meditation practice, some type of a spiritual practice that could cut through the chaos in my life. And I experimented with various different types of meditation and meditation technologies like brainwave entrainment. And I, again, became aware of subtle energy. I first became aware of the possibility of using subtle energy to transform the human heart, the human mind, the physiology. Back in 1999, when I'd gotten a hold of this catalog called Tools for Exploration. And it's a very cool catalog. And it was really about all these different types of technologies that people use to hack their minds, their performance, to reach altered states of consciousness, to create positive change in their lives. And I used to read that thing like a book. I knew it like the back of my hand. I used to subscribe to it, and I became fascinated with this idea that you could use technology to hack the human mind, human performance, the human spirit. And in there was an ad for a set of CDs where this guy claims he had captured various gradients of subtle energy in digital form and put them on CD. And I later, several years later, was able to afford to buy those. I bought those. I didn't feel that they were that powerful, but the idea was intriguing to me, and I felt that the potential there was something that could be developed into something that could be really transformational. And after years and years of experimenting with various types of meditation, I eventually met a gentleman whose informal title was a Shaktipat master, because he had trained with two different Vedic Hindu spiritual masters, Shiva Bala Yogi and Vitatri Maharishi, where in essence the main transference was this transference of energy called Shaktipat, where he would go into these profound states of consciousness. And I think at one point he was he had meditated for 23 hours a day for 40 days and 40 nights. in this extended state of samadhi where this Shaktipat energy had completely just engulfed him and taken him into this deeper state of consciousness. And I started meditating with him on a daily and weekly basis over the course of 3 years. And a lot of those meditations were long distance. And I noticed that when I would tap into him, connect with him spiritually and mentally, that immense upwelling of elation and energy would just overtake me. And instead of having to struggle to meditate, the energy would meditate me. And I was experiencing these profound states of samadhi, and that again awoke within me this idea: is what if we could capture this energy, in a digital form, and such that when you encode it into various files, digital files, audio, pictures, video, what have you, and you play it back, you can experience this uplifted Shaktipat state, and you don't necessarily have to prescribe to a guru-student relationship like I did. And so that's what I've dedicated my life to. And then I found that with subtle energy, we could use it to enhance health, wellness, performance, consciousness. I just found it to be a very versatile form of technology, and I think it holds a lot of potential in terms of positive transformation in society.
All right. So what can you tell us about solfeggio tones? I get people asking me about solfeggio tones. I've been listening to some meditations. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how you can stay awake for the meditations 90% of the time, but could
Right.
you tell us something about for solfeggio tones and how beneficial they are?
Sure. Now, I would say, first of all, part of what we do is we have the reason I'm talking about this is we do have a program that incorporates the solfeggio frequencies. That said, I wouldn't necessarily say that I am the world's foremost expert on solfeggio frequencies. It's not necessarily my principal focus. But the general literature on the solfeggio frequencies is that there are a set of frequencies, 6 different frequencies or 9 different frequencies, all lower than 1,000 hertz. Between I believe they fall in between the 100 hertz and up to just below 1,000 hertz. And the idea is that each of these frequencies has a particular beneficial set of benefits for human psychology, human spirituality. One of those that's most well known is the 528, which is the so-called frequency of love. And so I did experiments with these where generally, like you say, with most solfeggio frequencies, they can be, in order to get the most out of them, you have to play this frequency in the background for a fairly long period of time. And if you want to amplify the effects, you really can't do that without having to turn the volume up. And listening to a single frequency like that can be very, it can overwhelm the ears a little bit over time. So, but generally the idea is that this 528 hertz has a healing capacity on human physiology. What we noticed, one of the things that I did is I started taking these frequencies and running them through a kind of Tesla coil that transforms them into what is referred to as a scalar wave, or subtle energy, essentially. So what you're basically doing is you're stepping up that sound wave into a much higher energetic form that is subtle and actually doesn't have any sound to it, but you can feel it, and it still has its vibratory resonant effects. And what I found is when I did this, when I transformed the 528 hertz frequency into a scalar signal, and then amplified that many times, I found that first of all, you can amplify it many times, but there's no sound, so you're turning the volume up, so to speak, of the energy, but not the sound. So it doesn't hurt your ears, and you can make it as powerful as you like. And what happens at very high amplitude levels with 528 hertz as a scalar signal, it's very relaxing. And it ends up, you can actually end up going to sleep. Now, what I found is if I play that at very high amplitude, a part of that, the reason why I believe that it's so relaxing is because it's entering into a particular resonant relationship with the heart. And what I've noticed with the heart, when you go through what's sometimes referred to as a heart activation, where the heart chakra is activated, um, at first that activation manifests as drowsiness and sleepiness because your heart's basically releasing stuff. That's very relaxing. When I found it very high amplitude, played for hours and hours, uh, nonstop, that relaxation ends up turning into a very almost pure ecstasy. And we're talking about a very powerful high state of consciousness. But essentially, the solfeggio frequencies are a set of frequencies that have powerful physiological, spiritual, and emotional resonant effects on human biology.
Okay. So I would say your company leads the field. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you could help me out on this, but I see you offer a plethora of products. Where do you see this industry goes? And do you think this technology is being used on the masses today?
Wow, great question. I do, as far as I'm aware, no one's doing it quite the way that we're doing it. I haven't gone to, I have learned from various different teachers and mentors in subtle energy, but the way we're doing it, I don't know anybody that's doing it like I do it. It's taken me years and years of focusing on this. This is pretty much all I do full time, is just focus on the technology and evolving it. Are is it being used on us? Yeah, there probably are variations of this. In fact, just last week, I was contacted by a lady on the East Coast who's a professional woman. She has, she's married, they have kids, and she was talking about a gentleman that she once saw in a crowd, and she realized she had seen him before. And over time, she realized she was being followed by this guy, but he would just look at her and stare at her, and she started having weird energetic phenomena where she 24/7, and she didn't know any other way to put it, but I felt like this guy was putting some kind of a spell on her. It seemed like he was using some kind of technology to even hack her emails as they were being received and changing them in real time. But this brings up the idea of targeted individuals. Now, I used to think that people calling themselves targeted individuals were just people looking for attention, right? I didn't, they might be crazy or dealing with certain mental, emotional issues. Of course, the proverbial tinfoil hat, we see that when we think of these kinds of things, and we think it's all just conspiracy and craziness. I've completely changed my mind on that. First of all, I can tell you, um, this kind of technology can be used to do some really interesting things that are not limited by our conventional notions of space and time. Meaning, if someone wanted to, these kinds of technologies can be used to affect other people at a distance. So I do not recommend it. We use this technology to create positive change for ourselves and our peers, but there when I delved into the research, it turns out that some of these targeted individuals are legitimate. For example, I became aware of a psychologist who said that he was, and I forget his name, but he said that he was contacted by a woman who believed that she was targeted. And so he decided to simply um, put some cameras in her apartment and observe her, and also observe her from outside uh, her apartment for, I don't know, a few weeks. And what he found was there was an elaborate setup around her. And it was being run by a former CIA agent who now had his own company. I forget what kind of company it was, but essentially, I think it was it might have been a security company, but essentially they were using surveillance equipment to surveil her, to see when she ate and then when she was present and when she left her apartment. When she left, they would come in and inject her favorite foods with certain types of drugs. She would eat those foods and then be in a catatonic state, be out for several hours, and they would have people come in and rape her while she was passed out. And they were being paid to let these people come in and do this. But getting back to the lady who contacted me, she's talking about all this different types of energetic uh, uh, influences that she's experiencing, and she can't explain them, and they're very difficult to handle. I can I'm and I told her, I said, I absolutely believe you, and I gave her some the best I could, some tips and help to deal with that. But I do believe it's a real issue. Um, People may be familiar with the MK Ultra program, which we know is a real program that supposedly was stopped by the U.S. government, the CIA, in the late 60s. But they actually tried to cover that up. And the only reason we were able to find out anything about it at all is because when they had all the files removed, when they found out that this particular office was being raided to find out more about the MK Ultra program, most all the files were taken, and they just happened to find in this one lost file cabinet some files that act as the basis for our knowledge of MK Ultra today. Those files represent maybe 1% of what actually was there and was hidden. Essentially, MK Ultra was a program designed to use to study different ways of controlling human physiology, the human mind, to create a Manchurian candidate, so to speak, without that person's knowledge, right? So to be able to use hypnosis, a combination of hypnosis, drugs, torture, and other types of stimulation and conditioning to create what they called altered, multiple personalities, alternate personalities, where the personality splinters off because the torture and the programming are so inundating that's what the brain does to sort of preserve energy and some sense of normalcy and balance and being able to deal with the situation. And then as one of those personalities is splintered off, they can program that personality to do various types of things. It sounds over the top, but it's very, very real. We've got transcripts where we can see, for example, in one experiment where they took a lady who was able to pick up a gun and point it at her best friend and pull the trigger and not realize what she was doing. And of course, there were no bullets in that particular gun, but they were able to do this. And there's a lot of reasons to believe that program was never stopped, and there are probably many spin-off programs. And one of the things I've learned about government and psychopathy is, particularly where you have a top secret, an intelligence agency like the CIA that's known for going in and doing crazy things in other countries, that's known for MK Ultra and mind control. You're going to, whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, those kinds of programs are going to attract psychopaths, people who want to exercise their psychopathy, sadistic psychopathy, above the law. And what better way to do that with non-local energy weapons where you can torture people and they can't trace it back to you, and you're in control, right? Whenever you're talking about crimes like rape, serial killing, murder, or torture, you're talking about individuals, psychopaths, sociopaths, who enjoy being in control of other people, right? So I have no doubt that things like that are going on. To what extent, it's hard to say. Now, with the capacities of various types of subtle energy technologies, scalar wave weapons, quantum computing, and the quantum internet, I believe it's possible. It's certainly going to be possible in the future to essentially use quantum physics, the quantum internet, and quantum computing to hack into human brains if you really wanted to, right? To essentially where you can implant thoughts into people's minds. There's already technologies out there for doing that have been patented. Some use microwaves. There is even a patent for a machine out there that can read your brain waves from a distance without having to hook a EEG to you, and then creating a similar brainwave pattern to enter in a resonance with your brainwave pattern and slowly lead you into the desired or targeted brainwave pattern, all at a distance without being traceable. These things go on. We have records of people actually dying mysterious deaths like this. For example, there's a gentleman whose name I forget, but he was an attorney. He was contacted by a very high-level criminal in a prison for whom he ended up being an attorney, and he ended up sitting with him and finding out some very interesting, very crazy claims about what really went on at Waco with the whole debacle there. And he came to the point where he believed this was actually happening. He had insider knowledge of what went on there. He had tried to contact the State Department and asked them for a meeting to talk about this. This was in the 90s. He wrote a letter, which I've seen a copy of, to Madeleine Albright, who I believe was she's the Secretary of State, or maybe, I believe that's what she was. He wrote that to her, asking for a meeting as soon as possible to talk about what really went on there, what was going on in terms of the corruption within the military and the government. And 1 week later, this was in Washington, D.C., he was found in his apartment dead on the toilet, and he had been cooked from the inside out. His colon was hanging out his anus, and it looked like some type of a very high-level electromagnetic coil had been placed in the room below his apartment under the toilet, and was used to fry him from the inside out as he sat on the toilet. I've done research, and these kinds of things do exist. And there used to be a guy in Arizona who was selling coils that were very similar to that. So these things are very, very real.
Okay. So I know you offer several products or several items on your website. Is there anything that the beautiful infinite creators can buy or get in the way of technology or subtle energy, science, to help protect themselves?
Well, we from that kind of phenomenon, no, we haven't developed anything like that yet. We may do that in the future. I have a very long list of different types of products and technologies based on subtle energy requests. People who we have thousands of requests. Can you create something for this? Can you create something for that? And it takes, creating this technology for me does take a great deal of time, which is one of the reasons why I have to spend most of my time working on it. So it could take us a while to develop something like that. I don't know how far in the future, how soon we can develop something like that. I do believe it's possible to create technology to do that. However, what we do have is in all of our different programs, we do have frequencies in there which in general do balance human physiology and do protect against, for example, the negative effects of EMF and things like that. But no, we haven't gone that far yet. And to my knowledge, I don't know anyone that has. I mean, I've heard of various devices that make those claims. How successful they are, I don't know.
Okay. So what inspired you to take this direction? Who inspired you? Was it your iWake experience with starting with that company, or what was it that got you like wanting to develop the quantum technology that you work on?
Well, the first company I started was iAwake Technologies. I actually started that company with a friend of mine, and then later we had two other partners, John and Pam Dupuy, who came and joined. That was a brainwave entrainment company. That's where we're using sound to create altered states of consciousness. And essentially, Chris, I got to the point with brainwave entrainment where I just got a little bored with it. And I felt like it was limited in its potential to, and how you could use it to create states of, altered states of consciousness to create positive change in people. But it's still powerful. It was my starting point for transformational meditation technologies. But I essentially got bored with it. And by that time, I had already experimented with capturing subtle energy in digital form. And when I started iAwake Technologies, although our principal technology was brainwave entrainment technology, we were also, I would also encode the early nascent forms of this technology into our brainwave entrainment. We were calling it biofield technology at the time. And I was very sensitive to this technology, more sensitive than the average person. And the changes and the effects and the states that I was experiencing with it were so powerful to me. And like I said, when I met that Shaktipat master and apprenticed with him for about 3 years, it was all about the energy. Okay. There was no talking. I mean, it wasn't about the talking. It was about connecting with that energy, and basically the energy did all the work. That to me was so transformational. It was more transformational than any sound technology I had ever used. It was more transformational than any other meditation technique I'd ever used. And so I became absolutely obsessed with this idea that subtle energy could be captured in digital form and amplified and encoded into audio, encoded into pictures, such that when you pull that picture up on your computer, or if you print it out, you don't even have to look at it. You can put it under your seat cushion. That its energy would actually broadcast directly into your biofield and help you to enter these deeper states of consciousness, more or less automatically. I just became obsessed with it. And my first company, Chris, my first partner with that company, he was not familiar with the science behind subtle energy. And he was really worried that my foray into this not very well known science behind subtle energy, he was nervous that it would ruin his reputation, that would ruin the reputation of the company. And so he asked me to please stop talking about it. And I was the principal creator of the technology at the time, I pretty much had dedicated my life to run this company. And my gut response was, not only will I not stop talking about it, this is going to be my principal focus. And so eventually it became kind of a rift between us. And little did I know, and I do not hold this against him in any way, because I fully understand. About a year later, at my behest, I did ask that he leave the company for various other reasons I won't get into. But I had found out that during that whole year, he was going behind my back to the other two partners and telling them that they should separate from me because I would ruin their reputations, because I was not scientific. And it had nothing to do with me being not scientific. It had everything to do with the fact he just did not understand the science behind what I was doing. I was aware of the science, had become ensconced in the science, and yes, there's a whole body of scientific knowledge and evidence related to the science of subtle energy that shows there are real influences that can occur at a distance faster than the speed of light that can't be explained in terms of conventional physics or regular locality and other local influences. For existence, distance at a healing, non-local communication, where you have two people that are separated by a great distance. It could be 100 miles, it could be 1,000 miles. They're both in Faraday cages. One is hooked up to an EEG. The other is looking at a monitor with various images popping up on it. Some of those images are very evocative, and they create very unique EEG patterns in the brain as the brain reacts to these, sometimes sexual or violent images. And what they found is when the two people in this particular experiment were known to each other, they were friends, maybe a married couple who had spent time together, many years together. When they separated them by distance, put them both in these Faraday cages, hooked one up to an EEG, showed these evocative images to the other person, what they'd find is that the other person's EEG would actually show these spikes at exactly the same instant that these images were being shown to the other person. So there's a non-local transference of energy and information and communication that's happening in a way that science can't explain, and that is what we call a proof of the existence of subtle energy and these action at a distance kinds of influences. So I became ensconced with this science, absolutely mesmerized with it, and I had made up my mind that this was the path I was going to go, and it just didn't make sense to that particular partner at that time, and that was just part of the path, and I can understand that, that to him, the territory I was wading into was woo woo, and he was so concerned about his image. And he was part of a community that places a high value on scientific evidence. And people talk about, well, do you or do you not believe in science? Well, science is never about belief. It's never supposed to be about belief. It's really supposed to be about the data and evidence. And when I started looking into the data and the evidence, Chris, I started seeing these amazing experiments where the subtle, energetic, non-local transference of energy and information were taking place, and it didn't cost me costing me that relationship, but it's just pure obsession. Pure obsession, I would say, is what caused me to do this. And as I started doing experiments with this technology, I just started noticing experiences and changes in my life, and one of those was I experienced for the first 20 years of my life debilitating depression, to the point that was one of the reasons why it was very difficult for me to keep a job. I had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I would experience manic highs, but I would also experience these very debilitating periods of depression where it felt like my whole heart, mind, soul, and body were just sucked into a black hole. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't even have enough energy to kill myself, even though I would think about it. I'd be obsessed about it. A lot of self-hatred, a lot of anxiety and futility would come up, and it would make it very difficult for me to work, to do anything, to keep relationships, to keep a home. And what I found is when I began working on this technology as obsessively as I had, and spending hours and hours in the midst of this technology, we're using these vibratory patterns to change the base state of the local space or environment. I stopped getting depressed. I would still have periods where my energy was down, but I wasn't being sucked back into this black hole anymore. And, knock on wood, it's been, I'd say a good, I haven't even kept track. I would say it's been a good 11 years or so, maybe 9, 10 years since I've experienced that kind of depression. So it was those kinds of results, the kinds of changes I was seeing that really brought me into this direction.
Okay, so if somebody's dealing with depression, right? What kind of advice would you give them? How could you help them, and what products that you have that may be able to help them?
Well, again, now we're talking about depression. We don't have anything specifically for depression, and obviously, I am not a doctor, so I would advise anyone to get professional help. Myself, what I found was the medications that I was prescribed, they just made life very difficult. So it wasn't like once I got on lithium that I could hold down a job. And in fact, when I first got prescribed lithium, it was difficult to hold down a job. Forget any kind of intimate relationships. Couldn't have that because the whole business downstairs stopped working, and I lost my strength in the gym, and my strength went way down. And even the simplest of tasks, I could get wrong and mess up. It really dumbed me down. And I remember trying to hold a job while I was on that stuff, and my boss believed I was a very stupid individual, and he treated me like one. It was a very abusive relationship. So I began a quest for looking for alternatives. I wouldn't recommend people to just stop their medication or anything like that. But I would say, in general, one of the strategies I found helpful with depression is, first of all, by being willing to heal myself, I had to believe that it was possible to heal it. So stay open to the possibility that healing is really possible, no matter how bad your depression might be, that life really is worth living, and be open to trying new things. And keep trying new things until you find something that works for you, and then learn to integrate those things into your life and make them part of your lifestyle. And now we do have various products that can certainly lift the mood. We have like 45 different products. So right off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that might help somebody in some way working with depression. We have a number of different types of products that help with mood. So for example, if you're dealing with depression, we have a program called Neuroenergetics. One of those sub-programs in there is for releasing more serotonin in the brain. We have another one that's for releasing more dopamine in the brain. And you could play with those two programs in a way to sort of shift your mood through a very healthy relationship with your own neurochemistry. Those kinds of things can be very, very helpful. We have another program in that's called audio oxytocin, and it helps encourage the body to release more oxytocin. And what I found in that particular program at a very high amplitude, when you're running that for hours at a time, it does put you in a state that really does make it very difficult to slip into depression. And it helps you to connect with your own ability to bond with other social groups and to essentially bond with other people. Um, Even if you're only seeing those people like on a screen on YouTube, that you can still feel that sense of empathy and emotional resonance between people when you have healthy oxytocin levels. So those are things that can help. But my general strategy would be, again, don't hurt yourself. Like uh, I've been asked before, why do people commit suicide? And can we ever understand it? The simple answer is you're never going to fully understand why people commit suicide, because when they commit suicide, they're not in their right minds. And that's the main thing to understand. You're not in your right mind when you're thinking of those kinds of things and doing those kinds of things. And the reason most people can't understand that is because they've never experienced depression at that level. When I was um, struggling with depression in the early 90s, I was part of a community, and I had several friends in there could not understand why I was so depressed. And there was judgment going my way, and I was doing the best I knew how. It was a very difficult time. And then I ended up speaking with one of those people about 3 or 4 years later, and he said, "Eric, I did not understand it until I experienced it." And I went through a period of about a year where I was just soul crushing depression. And he said, "I get it. And I would never wish that on my worst enemy." So generally, just understand that if you're in those states, you're not in your right mind. Okay. So just understand healing is possible. Life is worth living, and be open to trying new things. And, um, uh, and as you find things, make it a life priority to keep finding new things, whether it's nutrition, whether it's meditation, whether it's various types of technologies. Keep trying new things. I got to a point where I realized that instead of investing money into buying a new car, for example, I was going to invest it into healing myself, right? Invest it into some kind of technology could help me move beyond that point. And so I made investing in my own healing a priority. So that's what I started spending my money on. Now, I've met other people who say they want to heal, but they don't spend any of their money on it towards healing, or they say, "I can't afford it." But it became a life obsession for me to be able to afford it. And even if I couldn't afford it, there was a point where I was homeless, and I wasn't spending my money on drugs. I wasn't spending on alcohol. I wasn't even saving it to get an apartment. I was using it to invest in these kinds of technology. I was meditating every day, was working, and I'd come to my little cubby hole out in the back alley every day after work, and I'd meditate for an hour with these types of technologies. And I was investing in myself, and that's how I eventually was able to get myself to a place where I could hold down an apartment, I could hold down a part-time job, and then I could start my own business. And I went to school, and I did very, very well in school. Um, so I would say invest in yourself, whatever that is, whether it's our products or other types of technologies or lifestyle changes. Invest in yourself, be patient, take time, and when you find things that work, integrate them into your life and make them a part of your lifestyle.
Okay. Were there any books? Were there anything that you read to help turn your life around? And I know that you're a big science guy, you're into the technology, but did faith somewhere along the line play a part in let's say your turnaround?
Absolutely. Now, I wasn't raised in any particular religious persuasion, but I did live near a church when I was about 12, 13 years old. And from that time, I became a part of that church. So it was a Baptist church. And eventually, I ended up going through a born again Christian experience when I was 20 years old. It was actually very difficult for me because I was dealing with things like obsessive compulsive disorder. I was very neurotic, and bipolar disorder. And I had several Christian mentors during that time for about 3 years who were trying to mentor me and help me. And frankly, Chris, from their particular Christian perspective, they couldn't help me, you know. So I was in and out of the church for years, and I could never really find help. I found a lot of loving people. I personally, some of the best people I met in my life were Christians, but a lot of them did not know how to help me. So I ended up looking elsewhere for help via these technologies and via other spiritual traditions and other self-help modalities and things like that. And through all of that, I had faith. Through all of that, I had faith that there is a God. If you're Christian, you believe that there's the God the Father who's sitting on the throne, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus Christ. But even if you're not a Christian and you don't believe that God has a personality, you think God is just energy, whatever that is, I mean, there's something bigger than all of us. There is an author of all creation that allowed this big bang boom and this sophisticated, complex world and universe that we live in, both seen and unseen. There's an author to that. I've looked into, for example, the science of intelligent design, and they make very valid scientific arguments that what we see with the naked eye is there's evidence that it is the product of some type of intelligence. So in general, I began to have faith in that larger creative intelligence, that I felt like I was receiving intuitions that my life had worth, that I had. If I didn't have an innate purpose, I could certainly develop a purpose that was meaningful to me, that I could make a difference on earth by learning to heal myself. I became convinced that we're all connected beyond space and time. And every action I take, every thought I have, every emotion I experience is encoded into the ethers, so to speak, into that spiritual layer, that invisible layer that suffuses all, interpenetrates all existence. And that is, when I make the effort to heal myself, that effort and that record is stored energetically in the spiritual space that interpenetrates all things. And when I realized that because that was true, that by putting more effort to heal myself and my life experience, I was actually helping other people to do that, because we're all connected, they could tap into that energetic record. In other words, there's a morphic field, so to speak. There's been a lot of studies. There's a morphic field that records everything we do. And the more of us that focus on healing ourselves and living lives that respect human life, that respect other people, that see the best in other people, that are striving to create businesses, jobs, lives that lift up other people, that when we do that, that effort, that thought, that intention, that energy is recorded in the ether. And when I heal myself, it helps everyone to heal that much easier, because now they can tap into that record, and it becomes a source that enables them to heal themselves more easily than they would be able to otherwise, because we're all connected, right? And so when we make an effort to raise our own consciousness, it's actually raising the sea level for everyone, so to speak, because these actions are interconnected, and there's an intelligence that records everything. And as I lay that field of healing myself, it becomes an energetic track or record, so to speak, that allows other people to tap into that and heal themselves more easily. And I began to have faith in God, essentially. And also that because God loves me, however you want to define that, whether it's a person who loves me or it's just the nature of consciousness itself is love, and I'm in that love, so I'm accepted as being a part of that love, however you want to interpret that. I began to realize that that God had my back. God loved me, and because God loves me, I could love myself. I could believe in myself. I believe, and so my faith in God became the basis for my faith in myself, and that is one of the major healing modalities that has kept me going. And I would say I'm still in the process of healing. You know, Chris, I would say one of the reasons that I obsess so in such a focused way on this technology and evolving it is because it gives my life so much purpose. And uh, and as I do that, it's added more order, more meaning to my life. But I still have residues of bipolar disorder. You know, I considered myself a very dysfunctional person, and I'm still dealing with those dysfunctions. All right. So I'm still in the process of healing. And I would say faith is essentially what it is it is faith in the unseen. As you become familiar with what is not seen, it's more like, it's almost like an intuition. It's not blind, it's actually quite informed, but it's informed by the invisible world of the spirit. And so to me, faith is how I live. um, but I might call it intuition, I might call it insight, I might call it um, unconventional wisdom. Yeah.
Okay. So how can the beautiful infinite creators get in touch with you? How can they find you? How can they find your technology? How could they find the company? Can you share that with us?
Sure. So um, our website is subtle.energy. That's SUBTLE dot energy, not .com. Subtle.energy, as in subtle energy. Very simple. We've got lots of articles, and I've got a huge, lots of blog articles on there. If you go into the About section, you can find out more about the technology and the science behind it. You can also find us on Facebook, Subtle Energy Sciences. Just enter that in. And we have a private Facebook group on Subtle Energy Science as well. And our Instagram is probably our biggest social media presence, is our Instagram account. And you can find us there at subtle_energy.
Awesome. There you guys have it. But before we wrap this up, Eric, I want to salute the divinity in you.
Likewise, brother. Thank you so much.
Before we go, we usually ask our guests to give parting words to all the beautiful infinite creators. What can you leave with the beautiful infinite creators if they come back or when they come back to look at this content that they're going to remember Eric Thompson?
I would say, first of all, and I think it's an important message at this time, is believe in yourselves, believe in one another, um, uh, believe in something greater beyond all of us, and uh, be kind to one another. And that includes, there's a lot of political stuff going on. Be kind to political persuasions on both sides of the fence and everything in between, around, over, under, sideways, and beyond. Be kind. Strive to learn how to love people. If you fail at it, hey, love yourself. Love yourself, and then learn from it. But let's focus on kindness. Let's just focus on being patient with one another, believing in our higher potential, believing in each other, regardless of our religious persuasion, our race, our ethnicity, our political persuasion. Just be kind, be love. You're going to see a lot of stuff on YouTube and television that you disagree with, and just make peace with it. Be in a place of neutrality and kindness.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Beautiful infinite creators. Remember, we don't care about the haters because we are infinite creators. Keep creating, keep evolving. I hope you guys got as much out of this as I've gotten out of this. We want to thank Eric Thompson. I humbly bow before you, and hopefully we do this again.
Likewise, brother. I really appreciate you, Chris.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank
Yeah.
you. Have a good one. I salute you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Well, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you. Take care, Eric.
Take care, brother.
All righty. Take care.